On a typical day at Kennedy Airport in New York, many people are waiting to catch their flight. A woman named Donna, a wildlife photographer, disembarks and heads to the waiting area to catch her next flight. As in every airport, there is a lot of people movement. She then heads to the boarding zone queue, where she will wait for her next flight. However, strangely, she begins to hear the passengers differently, as if her hearing is heightened. She starts to feel unwell, somewhat dizzy, and hearing all those voices, she heads to the bathroom and enters a stall. There, she starts to feel worse. There are bite marks on her arm. She begins to feel increasingly worse and then starts having convulsions, and strangely, her eyes change color. It doesn't take long for a noise to be heard by the women who were there. The women are frightened and don't know what is about to happen when suddenly they hear a terrible roar. Scared, they scream and run away. A werewolf soon emerges from there and runs to where the passengers were, causing a great commotion. Desperate, they try to save themselves. An unsuspecting man is quickly killed while everyone else flees to avoid being caught. The police are quickly called and soon arrive at the scene. Some people are caught by the creature and brutally killed, while others are only injured. The police are also attacked. One of them tries to save a companion but is soon surprised by another werewolf that arrives from behind. Now, it was not just one, but others, as the virus was spreading. The current president of the United States, named Donald, along with his secretaries, discusses the incident. The whole situation worries him. He then calls for a general named Christopher, who sends several units to close all the entrances and exits of the airport. At the American Army Disease Research Institute, a man is called to his office, Major Brian. He is alerted about what happened at the airport. On the way to the airport, Christopher talks to a colonel named Falcons about the incident and that they did not know what awaited them there. He then asks to use only gas. Helicopters arrive and hover over the site. The soldiers prepare, put on their masks, and soon descend. From the upper windows, they see what happened, several people dead and terrifying beasts roaming among them. They set up a gas bomb and throw it. With it activated, they wait for it to take effect. Moments later, after the effect, we see Donna getting up among several dead people, apparently not knowing what happened. 24 hours later, New York is in quarantine. Many people are taken and imprisoned. Everyone who transformed is inside. Donna meets a doctor named Helen Gordon, who asks several questions but is interrupted because Donald had been bitten by a wolf. The doctor, thinking she was referring to everyone who had also been bitten, ignores it. She then gives him a medicine to slow down his heart rate. They realize that when one gets out of control, the transformation happens. Outside, one of the men has a pocket knife and prepares to escape. He manages to run out but is soon surrounded by soldiers and civilians. Upon transforming, Colonel Falcon shoots tranquilizer darts at him, making him sleep and soon return to normal. Still talking to the doctor, Donna gets scared because she heard gunshots, but the doctor says everything is fine. Already on her arm, they place a chip. Then, she follows where the others were, where there were many people, some still injured and others being treated. Seeing all that, she feels bad and collapses. A soldier tries to force her to get up, but Brian arrives and helps her up and go to a calmer place. Already lying down, a young woman with a tattoo on her arm says she is a wildlife photographer. Seeing that she was very worried, Brian tells her that they would soon return to their normal lives, although they still don't have the cure but are working on it. Donna then talks about something that happened before the airport, where she had been bitten. However, before she can continue, she faints from the effect of the medicine and does not finish what she wanted to say. More people arrive at the site, and one of them, named Call, is distraught with the situation, hindering the procedure for the doctor. He then questions her about being treated like animals, but soon they place the medicine in his mouth and give him the injection with the chip. Among the other infected, we see that he had not taken the pill. Outside, General Christopher is present, who, not trusting him much for being a scientist, says that if one of the creatures even scratches him, he would go to that same place along with the others. Brian says he is looking for a cure and reports to the president, but the cost doesn't care much about what he says. He says he should remember the hierarchy, as he is the general. Then they hear screams of despair coming from below and go to see what happened. Braga goes ahead with some men and soon sees that the fugitive creature had caused damage in victims. They continue the search and wonder how it happened, being surprised by the beast that kills one of the men. The colonel quickly shoots tranquilizer darts at it. We see that the person was Cal, who had spit out the pill. He is taken by the general to a room and strapped to a chair. Cal laments for having killed people, but the captain has plans for him. Bringing another infected person, he orders the transformation activator to be injected into both of them, and when they change form, a fight starts inside. The general sees it as a fighting ring, and when the glass breaks, but before he can enter, the colonel quickly shoots tranquilizer darts at him. Thinking about the war, he sees them only as deadly weapons that can be used. He then orders Cal to be killed. While the doctor talks about the possibility of a cure being made through patient zero and that it might work. However, they still don't know the truth about Donna. Ryan asks the general to review the video cameras to identify who patient zero is. After he leaves, we see that Falcon and Christopher plan to use Brian for their own benefits. Brian, already arriving at the airport, meets a man named Max Stevens, head of customs security. He takes him to show something, but the video center was destroyed, so they couldn't see the camera footage. But soon Max says he has something better and shows a hologram technology that records people every 5 minutes with a static image, like a realistic photo. Brian asks to see it again and notices Donna. He observes her face and a passage showing she came from Canada. He notices her camera and asks Max if it could still be intact at the airport. Max says yes and takes him to show it in customs. They see photos of wolves and a photo of her bitten arm. Then he remembers that was what Donna wanted to tell him before sleeping, that she was the first to contract the virus. He then deduces that she is patient zero. He gives the memory card and calls the general, reporting that he had found patient zero, while the general was in a helicopter outside with dark plans along with Falcon to eliminate Brian. They threaten 2 infected men and take them in that helicopter to kill Brian. He is then forced to transform with the injection, and is thrown, falling inside the airport near where Brian and Max were. Max tries to hide, and Brian draws the creature's attention. Running through the corridors, he manages to dodge, but soon gets cornered in the bathroom with no way out. Not wanting to kill her, he starts trying to calm the beast, knowing it was human and could have control. But his gun falls from the sink, aggravating the beast's rage, which tries to attack him, making Brian have no choice but to shoot her, killing her without knowing that the general was trying to kill him. Brian takes the car and goes back to find Christopher and Falcon. On the way, he calls them and says that a crossbreeding of wolves and dogs generated the mutation of a rare species of wild wolf, the same seen in Donna's photos. The locals called it a werewolf. He reports this to Dr. Helen, who becomes interested in what he was saying, talking about patient zero. With this discovery, the general tells them to look for the woman and calls the president's secretary. He tells him about the risky plan that could bring benefits to the nation. He also lies, saying that Brian is no longer reliable because he was infected, treating him like a terrorist. Donna hears a man saying they would be manipulated and treated like animals. She then puts away the paper she was writing on and leaves, worried. She notices she is being searched for and tries to hide but is soon spotted. Her heart rate accelerates, starting her transformation. But she manages to run and, already transformed, escapes. They pursue her with cars and helicopters, but she keeps running quickly. Already anticipating this, they set up an electric fence to prevent any werewolf from escaping. She is caught with a net and paralyzed with tranquilizer darts, then taken unconscious to the research room. Dr. Helen explains what happened regarding the mutations and the fact that Donna's body is not retaining the antibodies. Meanwhile, Max, looking at her X-ray, sees something strange in her arm, a tooth from some animal. We can say it was the wolf that bit her. Surprised, he goes to Brian. The general, not wanting to risk having his plans exposed and a cure possibly coming from her, orders Donna to be killed, but Brian stops him. He then tries to call the president, but Christopher, who had already taken the lead, says to the president that Brian was contaminated. Now he has no moral to accuse them. The soldiers call and say that Max was downstairs wanting to talk to Brian. Entering the room, he gives the scan file done on Donna's body. In Toronto, seeing the tooth in her arm, they realize she has the original DNA, which could allow them to recreate a 100% compatible cure. The general insists on killing her because they didn't want the cure. Brian tries to stop him, as without a cure the virus could spread more on Earth and the contamination could be irreversible. But the general says they wouldn't spread an infection, as they would be like weapons, killing their enemies with neurotoxins. Preventing him from transforming, Dr. Helen tries to make him not kill Donna and asks to help her survive, as she was the only hope for finding a cure. The general then authorizes her sedation, but Donna, due to the many sedatives, had a cardiac arrest. He orders the tooth to be removed from her arm, but when her heart rate increases, she wakes up already transforming into the creature. When she howls, it makes the others wake up and transform too, starting the slaughter inside. The general flees, and Falcon is knocked out by Brian. He finds the creature, but unfortunately Falcon is killed there. Brian, knowing the creatures still had some human sense, manages to calm Donna, who finally returns to being human. The other creatures head towards the city, and in the subway, where people are calmly waiting for the train, they encounter several werewolves and flee desperately. The creatures attack them anyway. The president is informed of this and taken to a safe place. He then calls Brian and says they were deceived by General Christopher. The president, however, doesn't believe him and asks Brian to surrender, but instead, he hangs up. They then think about what to do, and the doctor gives Donna a pulse monitor, always keeping her heart rate below 150. Afterward, the three leave but are surprised by gunshots. It was the general and his men. In the exchange of gunfire, the fight begins, as Christopher doesn't want Donna to survive and the cure to exist. In the city, the police prepare for a fight with the beasts, but they don't realize the horde approaching. When they see them, they retreat immediately. Meanwhile, Donna, Brian, and Dr. Helen reach the electric fence and look for a way out. Donna suggests an idea. They climb a tower, use an electric wire as a zipline, and cross to the other side. They get into a boat and escape, but soon are pursued. Thanks to a maneuver well done by Brian, they manage to get away. At this moment, updated on the damage the werewolves are causing, the president authorizes full force to stop the creatures. In the park, soldiers are already positioned and receive the green light to attack. An even larger number of werewolves, spreading the virus and transforming more people as they go, approach. As soon as they are spotted, the soldiers open fire. The beasts charge with fury, and a brutal battle ensues. However, the number of soldiers is small, and they start being eliminated. Brian, with the two women, takes a car and heads to the university, but a white car approaches and chases them. The doctor says they were found by the chip in Donna's arm. At an intersection, they manage to make the enemy's car crash and flip, but another car hits them, leaving them injured. Brian gets out but is surprised by Falcon, who is still alive and shoots him along with other soldiers. Donna is about to transform but is tranquilized and taken. Christopher and Falcon leave the city as they have a contingency plan. The president is soon informed of this plan, which would end millions of people in that city by dropping several bombs over Manhattan after isolating it. His secretary says it's a high price, but it would save the rest of the world. The men then wait for the president's authorization, which he soon gives. Brian, who hadn't died, gets up and sees the beasts emerging outside the city. He takes a car and goes to find Donna. On the way, he sees a police car, grabs weapons, and continues. General Christopher orders Dr. Helen to remove the tooth from Donna's arm. He then takes her to the procedure room and prepares to remove it. Brian reaches one of the entrances and gets ready to enter. The doctor manages to remove the tooth. The general calls for hidden bodies. Brian waits for the opportunity to attack, but there are many soldiers. He then grabs 2 water bottles and improvises a grenade. The doctor gets the antibodies and quickly applies them to Donna to see the result. They observe her starting to transform but quickly stops and Donna remains normal, showing the cure worked. The general takes the vial containing the cure and the doctor is knocked out. At this moment, the improvised grenade by Brian works, causing an explosion and drawing everyone's attention. The doctor wakes up and they untie Donna. Hearing a noise from the air duct, they soon discover it was Brian, who then takes them. But ahead, they are surrounded by soldiers and can't proceed. The general threatens to remove Dr. Helen's tooth if they don't surrender. Brian says he will hand it over and throws a cloth to the general. As he approaches and grabs it, he sees it's a grenade, which soon explodes, killing and injuring others. This gives Brian and the women a chance to escape. Brian shoots some of them but runs out of bullets when trying to shoot the general, leaving him at the mercy of death. Christopher is surprised by a beast attacking him. Despite being injured, he kills the monster. Thinking he had died, the 3 pass by him. We see Christopher opening his eyes, now with a different color, indicating he will also transform. Brian, Donna, and Dr. Helen take a plane to escape and replicate the cure. But before they can take off, a beast attacks, damaging the plane, which crashes ahead, on a bridge, leaving them unconscious and injured. Awakening, Donna tries to talk to Brian but is pulled out by the beast. Brian then sees the mutation virus, and injects it into himself with the intention of transforming. And already outside, he finds the beast that was about to kill Donna. They fight, and the beast, which was Brian, being weaker, is defeated. Donna awakens and sees the situation, grabs a grenade launcher on the ground. When Brian is about to be killed, she lures the monster and shoots, hitting its mouth, shattering it. Soon, it's Christopher, as the nameplate that falls from the beast had his name.
Severely injured, Donna can't hold on and dies in Brian's arms. Dr. Helen arrives and sees the buildings being destroyed by American fighters. They try to leave quickly to report they found the cure and stop the attack, so the city isn't completely destroyed.
Brian then contacts the president, telling him to abort the attack, as they finally have a cure for the infection.
The president is skeptical but, insisting, believes it. He cancels the attack at the last second. However, one of the bombs was already launched. A huge explosion occurs on the city's west side.
Brian and Dr. Helen, to avoid the blast, jump from the bridge and manage to save themselves. They reach the Manhattan Island shore, relieved to have escaped with the tooth, from which they can replicate the cure for the deadly virus.